Tango Falava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific, Oahu o Koroi Hawkins in for Susana Suisuiki. Coming up, we take a look at the new Tonga government's first and only budget.
So in this budget, one of the specific things they've done is assign quite a bit to private sector development.
Also, what's at stake for the world's oceans as negotiators prepare to head to France?
The only way for marine life to really recover is through fully protected areas.
And with dengue fever outbreaks in 4 Pacific countries, we talk to an expert from the World Mosquito Program. Tonga's Aisake-led government has produced its first budget, pumping up spending by more than 10% compared with last year. It has some key elements that differ from previous years, such as an assistance boost for some private sector businesses. Don Wiseman spoke with RNZ Pacific's correspondent Kalafi Moala and began by asking where the additional money is going.
One of the key things that this government, when they came into being, was declaring and proclaiming changes that they were going to make compared with, say, the previous government. And one of the things they have been saying was that they're going to, probably for the first time in Tonga's history, give money to the private sector. They've been giving the message of private sector development, that this is the pathway to economic development, to the future, and so on. So in this budget, one of the specific things they've done is assign quite a bit to private sector development. The details, of course, on how this is going to be done. But the whole budget of 992 million plus, it's the biggest in Tonga's history, more than the budget of the last year's budget. And there's also, it's a deficit budget. I think, if I can remember, there's about 28 million in deficit. But then the government have said that they are going to pay for this deficit by issuing bonds, public bonds. So I guess they've got that all worked out.
Public bonds, has Tonga issued bonds before?
They have done that before. I can't recall when, but yeah, in the last, say, 10 years or so, they've done that.
In terms of this money going to the private sector, there are no details at all.
No details other than the fact that they think that fisheries and agriculture is going to be a major focus, particularly on businesses that have already started. For example, things like marketing and setting up tech houses for export. This is the kind of things that they think government's going to help in the development of the private sector.
That essentially is the only difference from the previous government, despite what they had said about the failures of the previous government.
That's right. The other thing, too, there have been quite a bit of talk this year about cover. Cover being a product that Tonga wants to focus on exporting. I mean, you've got this done out of Fiji, out of Vanuatu quite successfully. And so Tonga is entering the market, and this is another issue, another thing that they're going to help in the private sector development.
We don't know precisely what they might do in terms of that trade.
No, but you see, one of the problems that Tonga have been known for over the years is that Tonga have talked about marketing certain products. You remember the days when we were marketing squash to sending to Japan and to China. And then we ran out because the complaint has been that Tonga was not able to produce enough for the market. And we've seen that happening to cassava, we've seen that happening to other products. And there's hope that this is not the kind of things that will happen to cover. There's an excitement about exporting cover. People are starting to plant cover now, and there's a lot of talk about it. But then are we going to be able to stay and produce enough for the market?
In terms of education, there is subsidised loans will be available for non-government schools. What have they got in mind here?
Well, you see, it's been a normal thing that government's contribution to non-government schools is that there's $700 per head for every student. In other words, they're paying all non-government schools $700 per head. per year. And this has been going on up to the last government. So they are wanting to continue this process, but to make sure that it's done and to follow up, to make sure that the money goes to not just do the schools to spend on just projects that may not be necessary, but to focus on paying teachers. Because the complaint has been that a lot of teachers of non-government schools are underpaid and some of them are leaving for greener pastures overseas. And so there's a shortage of teachers in non-government schools. So yes, they're pledging that they're going to continue to do that.
Work is going to go into the nursing school.
Yes, there's a lot of planning going with that. You know, Tonga now, of course, has what we call the Tonga National University. And so all training that have come, tertiary type training, is now being under the Tonga National University. Teachers training, nursing training, training of seamen, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, there's a lot of funding that will go to that as well.
And a new hospital, I presume it's a new hospital on Vava'u.
Yeah, that comes under what they call the development budget. You have the recurrent budget, of course, which is part of the budget that goes into carrying the expenses, the current expenses of government. And then you've got the development budget, which goes to projects. And much of the development budget, of course, comes from aid. It goes into building wharves and hospitals and things like that. And yeah, there's been a lot of call for Vava'u that they need to upgrade healthcare in Vava'u. So the hospital is a major focus.
World leaders, civil society groups, scientists and businesses will gather in France next week for the third UN Ocean Conference. Ocean advocates, including those from the Pacific, want the summit to deliver real action towards sustainable ocean goals, including funding and genuine marine protection measures. Tewila Fuatai reports.
The Pacific has not been sitting idle. The Pacific has not been resting on its laurels.
That's Dr. Philemon Manoni, the current Pacific Ocean Commissioner.
The Pacific has been hard at work, walking the talk.
He advocates for ocean priorities regionally and internationally in his role, established through the Pacific Islands Forum architecture. Speaking at a special pre-summit briefing, Dr. Manoni says the Pacific is already leading the way in ocean sustainability, pointing to examples in tuna fisheries management and the establishment of marine sanctuaries like the Beka and Bokak atolls of the Marshall Islands. He says it's important for regional leaders to push for change together.
Pacific solutions are not only Pacific solutions, but Pacific solutions are indeed global solutions. At the end of the day, in terms of the fisheries example that I just shared, the beneficiaries or the benefits of this good work transcends the boundaries and the limits of the Pacific.
Marine biologist and leading ocean conservationist Enrique Sala says any progress at the summit will depend on the quality of commitments attendees agree to. Currently, 8% of the world's oceans are protected. The goal is for that figure to be 30% by 2030. However, Mr. Sala says the right areas of ocean need to be prioritised.
This is about quality as much as it is about quantity. It's not protecting any 30% of the ocean. We could protect areas that are now under ice and least productive areas of the high seas and cover 30% of the ocean. Check, we have protected 30% of the ocean, yet that would not make any difference.
He says the key is focusing on ocean commitments and initiatives that increase marine life beyond what exists right now. That approach has already shown to be fruitful, both for ocean conservation and for interested industries like tuna fisheries. For example, the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, one of the largest marine protected areas in the world in the northwestern region of the Hawaii Islands. Mr. Sala says the sanctuary has led to increased tuna stocks both inside and around the protected area, benefiting tuna fisheries in the region.
And the science is very clear. We have discovered over and over again that the only way for marine life to really recover is through fully protected areas where there are no extractive and managing activities. And we have plenty of examples from the Pacific and from around the world showing that the fishing industry is actually catching more fish and lobsters and scallops around no-take areas now than before, when they were fishing all over the place.
For both Mr. Sala and Dr. Manoni, the way forward is clear. To protect our oceans, genuine and ambitious marine protection measures are needed now, both in the Pacific and around the world. The UN Ocean Conference happens every 3 years. This year it's in Nice, kicking off on Monday next week.
Dengue fever cases have been surging in recent decades. According to the World Health Organization, there was just over 500,000 reported cases in 2000, ballooning to 5.2 million in 2019. This year in the Pacific, Samoa, Fiji, Tonga and the Cook Islands have declared dengue outbreaks, with at least one related death reported in all countries except the Cook Islands. Traditional methods such as spraying to control the disease-carrying mosquito populations are being used to try and tackle the virus with limited success. But new, innovative methods are also being looked at. Caleb Fotheringham asked the World Mosquito Programme's Senior Director of Field Entomology, Gregor Devine, why outbreaks are on the rise.
Increasing globalization, the movement of people and cargo around the world is ever accelerating. So that means two things. One, it means that the vectors, the mosquito insects that transmit dengue, they hitchhike around the world kind of with cargoes. So their range is spreading very rapidly. And of course, once you've got a competent mosquito that can transmit the disease, then when the disease is imported in the form of a human traveler who is carrying the virus, then those local mosquitoes can then transmit the disease. So globalization is accelerating all that because of the movement of cargo and the expansion in the mosquito population, and then also, of course, the very, very rapid movement of people around the globe all the time, moving from disease-endemic areas to areas which perhaps didn't have so much dengue historically. But now you've got all these people carrying virus into new places in the world. So look, that's one thing, globalization. The other is that a lot of human populations are still naive to the virus. That is, they don't have any protection against it because they've never been exposed to it before. And dengue comes in 4 different serotypes. So just because you've had one doesn't mean you can't get another. And so there's lots of pressure on these kind of immunologically naive populations as well in terms of their exposure to virus from people coming in from outside. The third thing, and perhaps the most important thing now, is really climate change. So climate change is changing conditions in favor of the proliferation of mosquitoes. So we are hotter and wetter than we've ever been before. And one, that's great for mosquitoes. And two, it also means that the virus in mosquitoes is replicating more rapidly. So, mosquitoes are cold-blooded. So when they have the virus within them, that virus can only replicate at the kind of the rate of the kind of ambient temperature around the mosquito. With climate change, with global warming, then that means that those viruses can replicate faster, and so they can be transmitted faster.
So if we're going to get more outbreaks, how can they be managed or completely stamped out by governments across the world?
So dengue is something that has really kind of come to the fore, in the last, maybe 50 years or so. So the number of countries being exposed to dengue is ever increasing. It's now by far the world's commonest insect-borne disease. So something incredible like 400 million people annually around the globe get dengue. Most of them aren't particularly symptomatic, but about a quarter of them are, and then a small number are very, very severely affected. And traditionally, the control of that transmission has all been by targeting the mosquito itself, by trying to decrease the number of mosquitoes and therefore the number of times that people are being bitten by mosquitoes. And that's been done, and people around the Pacific will be very familiar with cleanup campaigns where we try and get rid of the kind of aquatic habitat where the mosquitoes breed. And Aedes aegypti, which is the main vector of dengue, likes to breed in relatively clean water in all kinds of containers. It could be a bucket, it could be a pollen that's collected water. They can breathe in all those kind of things. So these public cleanup campaigns are based around trying to get rid of some of those containers. And then when there are outbreaks, often our only response is to use insecticides. And there's not a great deal of evidence that suggests that insecticides are really very useful at targeting the specific mosquito that transmits dengue. And that's because it's a very, very it's very strongly adapted to the human population. So it loves to rest and bite indoors. It's completely reliant upon humans for its blood meals. And so we have problems often getting insecticides into people's houses. People are not very keen on the idea sometimes. A lot of houses are obviously closed, locked, people are at work or at school. It's very hard to get access to houses. For the future, there are other things. The people that I work for, the World Mosquito Programme, they promote a safe, effective and sustainable solution where by introducing a naturally occurring bacteria to mosquitoes and then releasing those mosquitoes, then they establish a population of mosquitoes which is, because of the presence of this bacteria, has a reduced ability to transmit viruses. And that's that program initiated in Australia, around about kind of 2011, 2012, and it's now active in several countries. And looking at a Pacific example, it's been trialled in New Caledonia, where it's been extremely successful. In the years since the mosquito releases have been made by the World Mosquito Programme, there's been no dengue epidemics, where once they were extremely common. It's not the only thing on the horizon. The other is there's a lot of talk about the use of GM mosquitoes at the moment. That's a different kind of strategy where you release large numbers of mosquitoes which have been modified in a way which means that when those males interact with the local mosquito female population, then the resulting offspring are not viable, and so that can crash the entire population. That's not as established yet as the Wolbachia type method, but it is something that's on the horizon. And then there are a number of other ways. In French Polynesia, for example, they're working on the sterile insect technique, which is similar to the GM technique in that it's, they irradiate large numbers of male mosquitoes, release the male mosquitoes, and those male mosquitoes, because they've been irradiated, their sperm doesn't function properly, and when they mate with wild-type mosquitoes, again, none of those matings result in viable offspring, and so the population crashes.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's quite a few projects in the works and quite effective projects. Just on the GM mosquitoes, is there any long-term risk with that, like the whole species of mosquitoes could collapse?
So when we're talking about the control of Aedes aegypti, then it is people often refer to it as the kind of cockroach of the mosquito world. It's very, very closely adapted to the human population. In most parts of its range, the species evolved in Africa and has since, spread kind of throughout the world. It's not a particularly important mosquito for many ecosystems. So I wouldn't be particularly worried about, decimating numbers of that mosquito anywhere. None of the techniques that are currently sort of predicted to become important in the future, whether it's whether it's GM or SIT or the Wolbachia techniques, none of those are actually going to eradicate that species. There will always be areas where the mosquito is still proliferating. The advantage of the World Mosquito Programme's Wolbachia-based technique is that we're not trying to suppress the mosquito. We're actually just replacing the natural population with one which can't transmit disease. So we're actually having almost no impact upon the mosquito population itself, just upon its ability to transmit disease.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, Tofua Suifua.